Welcome back to Kafka Internal's Crashcasts. I'm your host Sheila, and today we're wrapping up our chapter on security in Kafka. We've covered SSL encryption and SASL authentication, and now we're diving into the final piece of the security puzzle, access control with ACLs. Joining me as always is our Kafka expert, Victor. Hi, Victor.
Hello, Sheila, and hello to all our listeners. I'm excited to talk about ACLs today. They're a crucial part of Kafka's security model.
Before we dive in, let's start with a quiz question for our listeners. Here's a tricky one. True or false? Once you've set up SSL encryption and SASL authentication in Kafka, you don't need to worry about ACLs. What do you think about this question, Victor?
Oh, that's a great question, Sheila. It really gets to the heart of why ACLs are so important. I think many people might be tempted to say true, thinking that encryption and authentication are enough. But let's not give away the answer just yet. We'll reveal it at the end of the episode.
Agreed. Now, before we get into the details of ACLs, could you give us a quick refresher on what ACL stands for and what it means in general?
Certainly. ACL stands for Access Control List. In the broader context of computer security, an ACL is a list of permissions attached to an object. It specifies which users or system processes are granted access to objects, as well as what operations are allowed on given objects.
That's helpful, thanks. So, how does this concept apply specifically to Kafka?
In Kafka, ACLs are used to control which users or applications can read from or write to specific topics, as well as who can modify topic configurations, create new topics, and so on. It's like having a bouncer at a club who checks not just if you're on the guest list, but also what areas of the club you're allowed to access.
I love that analogy. So, if SSL and SASL are like checking IDs at the door, ACLs are like the VIP wristbands that determine where you can go inside?
Exactly. That's a great way to think about it. Now let's dive a bit deeper. In Kafka, ACLs are defined using a combination of three main components: the principal, the resource, and the operation.
Could you break those down for us?
Of course. The principal is the identity of the client, which is usually derived from the SASL username or SSL certificate. The resource is the Kafka component you're trying to access, like a topic or a consumer group. And the operation is what you're trying to do with that resource, such as read or write.
That makes sense. So how do you actually set up these ACLs in Kafka?
Kafka provides a command line tool called kafka-acls.sh for managing ACLs. You can use this tool to add, remove, or list ACLs. For example, you might run a command to allow a specific user to read from a particular topic. The command would include the user's name, the operation they're allowed to perform, and the topic they can access.
That sounds like a flexible way to set up these ACLs. Are there any best practices you'd recommend?
Absolutely. One key best practice is the principle of least privilege. Only give users or applications the minimum permissions they need to function. Another is to use wildcard ACLs judiciously. While they can simplify management, they can also accidentally grant more access than intended if you're not careful.
Those are great tips. Now, I've heard that Kafka also supports a concept called superusers. How does that fit into the ACL model?
Good question. Superusers in Kafka are principals that have unlimited access to all resources. They bypass ACL checks completely. While this can be convenient for administrative tasks, it's important to limit the number of superusers and monitor their actions closely for security reasons.
That makes sense. It sounds like ACLs provide a lot of control, but also require careful management. How do ACLs in Kafka compare to access control in other messaging systems?
Kafka's ACL system is quite flexible and granular compared to some other systems. For instance, RabbitMQ uses a simpler permissions model with configure, write, and read permissions at the virtual host level. Apache Pulsar, on the other hand, has a role-based access control system that's somewhat similar to Kafka's ACLs, but with some differences in how roles are defined and applied.
Interesting comparison. Now, as we're wrapping up, are there any common pitfalls or misunderstandings about Kafka ACLs that our listeners should be aware of?
One common misunderstanding is thinking that ACLs are enforced at the message level. In reality, they're enforced at the request level. This means that if a client has permission to read from a topic, they can read all messages in that topic. Another pitfall is forgetting to set ACLs for internal topics that Kafka uses, like consumer offsets topics. This can lead to unexpected issues with consumer groups.
Those are great points to keep in mind. Now let's circle back to our quiz question. Is it true or false that once you've set up SSL encryption and SASL authentication in Kafka, you don't need to worry about ACLs?
And the answer is false. While SSL encryption and SASL authentication are crucial for securing your Kafka cluster, ACLs provide that final granular level of access control. They determine what authenticated users can actually do within your Kafka ecosystem.
Thanks, Victor. To summarize today's episode, ACLs in Kafka provide fine-grained access control, allowing you to specify who can do what with which resources. They work alongside SSL and SASL to form a comprehensive security model. Remember to follow the principle of least privilege, use the kafka-acls.sh tool for management, and be cautious with super users and wildcard ACLs.
Excellent summary, Sheila. I'd just add that while ACLs can seem complex at first, they're a powerful tool for ensuring the security and integrity of your Kafka cluster.
Thanks, Victor. That wraps up our chapter on Kafka security. Next time, we'll be starting a new chapter on exactly once semantics, beginning with a deep dive into the idempotent producer. Don't forget to subscribe to Kafka Internal's Crashcasts and leave us a rating if you're enjoying the show. Until next time, keep those topics flowing.